My name is Phillip Shearin, and I am a member of All Saints Episcopal Church in South Hadley, Massachusetts. And I am grateful for this opportunity just to chat a bit about my faith and my faith journey. When I think back to my early life in faith, faith has always been around me. I grew up in a very faithful family and a very faithful community of people whose faith really saw them through the worst of the Jim Crow era. I think back to many of the elders that I grew up with and knew, and my parents. The church for them and for most of the African American community at that time was a place where African Americans could find respect and dignity and autonomy in a world where many of them were regulated to domestic service jobs or menial work, and where they were constantly being disrespected and called boy or girl or auntie on the street. And so growing up sort of in that post-Jim Crow civil rights movement era, faith was something that was really important in our house, and the church community was something that was always really important. I was baptized at the age of 6 years old. The first time, though, I was really conscious sort of faith and sort of that transition period was when I was 13 years old. And unfortunately, I had a cousin who died in a horrible plane accident. And I just remember his grandparents' response to it. And they kept on saying that their faith in Christ gave them strength. And for me, I knew at that moment that God must actually really be real and true. If they could have lost, their grandson and their son, and in the same day, 2 generations of their family wiped out almost. But yet they were still able to hold on to their faith. And for me, that's really when I started to engage with my faith in more of an adult way. And I was very involved in church and throughout high school and college. And interesting enough, I came to the Episcopal Church through my Catholic campus ministry at college. We had an advertisement for a alternative spring break that was put on by the Episcopal Peace Fellowship. And actually a priest who's now in the Diocese of Western Massachusetts, Reverend Valerie Bailey Fisher, she was leading the weekend. And it was a week actually around homelessness in New York City, and I went, and we stayed in Harlem at St. Mary's Church, and we stayed in the Episcopal Service Corps house. And that was kind of when I first became aware of the organization and the Episcopal Church in more of a general way. I had been introduced to it as a child because my godmother was Episcopalian, and I had gone to her church, St. Luke's in Germantown, in Philadelphia, and I knew their priest there, Father Poindexter, who was a friend of my grandmother's. And so for me, that was my introduction. But really, that week of experiencing homelessness, I experienced the Episcopal Church as an adult and as a place that really reaches out from itself to those that are really struggling in life. And in this particular scenario, it was the homeless. And we went to several different churches and saw several different ministries that, reach out to the homeless in New York City and are making sure and fighting to make sure people are housed and that people have a sense of dignity, that people have food, that people have a place during the day just to shelter themselves. And I was really impressed. And I was impressed with the work that the young adults at that time and the Episcopal Service Corps were doing. And so I decided to apply, and I got accepted at St. Hilda's House, which is a part of Christ Church, New Haven. And throughout my year there of theological reflection and service, I discerned a call to the Episcopal Church, and I was received there as a member in the Episcopal Church. And from there, I went on to do some other things, and I ended up in seminary at the University of Toronto, Trinity College. And that brought me sort of, in my seminary journey, that helped me discern another journey, and that was my journey sort of into chaplaincy, into hospice chaplaincy now. And now I work as a full-time hospice chaplain for Beth Israel Lahey Health. And my faith impacts my work daily. I could not do my work if I didn't have my faith. For me, my faith grounds me in the promise of the resurrection of all of us at the last day. It's a promise that I cling to, particularly as I minister to all of these people and families that are losing a loved one and are closing out, their chapter of their earthly existence and transitioning on. And as I'm seeing people, oftentimes who have abandoned faith throughout their life, but in their moments of closing out their life, they then return to a faith of their childhood or seek some reconciliation with the faith that may have rejected them for whatever reason. And so I think my belief in resurrection, it's not only just the resurrection of the physical body, but it's that all of the pain and suffering that we've all go through in our lives, it was redeemed on the cross as well. Not only was eternal life open to us, but also all of this sometimes misery and pain and burdens we bear, that was taken on the cross with Jesus, and that at the end of the day, it is redeemed. And so that's my foundation for me going out to do my works. And in Galatians, it says to bear one another's burden is to thus fulfill the law of Christ. And for me, just to be with families and sit with them as they are really in a time of crisis and struggle and challenge, it's a huge privilege. And I've really been privileged to do that during this time of COVID-19. My work has changed, like everyone that works sort of in the care of elders or in geriatric medicine. In this time of COVID-19, elders have really bore the brunt of this burden and have really been affected. And throughout Massachusetts, many of our nursing homes have just been devastated by COVID-19. So my work has shifted to supporting families now, families that have been cut off from loved ones in nursing homes, supporting families that are trying to caregive in the midst of COVID, and not knowing if it's safe to allow in additional help and support that they may need, and wondering if they should go to the hospital or if they went, but their loved one gets seen. And just helping families with all of those major questions that have put a lot of people into crisis. So I have been able to be there as a support for them, and it's been wonderful for me to know that I'm helping to bear someone else's burden, and just to share in that for a moment, and to remind caregivers in particularly of their humanity. At this time, and that it's okay to be weak. It's okay to not have all the answers, and that we are all figuring out things together, and that we're all just trying to survive this time period, and that none of us have ever operated or functioned in a pandemic before. And this is where grace comes in, and to allow them and myself the room for some mistakes in this time. Mistakes are perfectly natural. They're a part of human life, and they're even a part of our faith journey. And Paul talked about mistakes he would make even. And we have Peter as a great example of someone who made mistakes. And so at this time, it's a time of all of us, I think, extending grace to others and to ourselves, and just making sure we survive this thing and get through as a community. And so that's what my faith means to me. What how I live out my faith daily and what I've been and how I root my life and my faith. So God bless you and thank you all.